Hello and welcome to the second edition of the Tyre Recycling Podcast. On this week's show, we're welcoming the first interviewee in our Expert Witness series with Martin van Wolferstorff. I'm Richard Wilson, contributor to Tyre and Rubber Recycling, and as usual, I'm joined by Ewan Scott, editor for Tyre and Rubber Recycling. Ewan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thanks, Richard. Like everyone else, I'm missing the face-to-face interaction, but these online interviews are bringing some sense of normality to the working day.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose I say this is the only sort of interaction we can have right now via digital software like this. This is the best thing we can do. But so talking of these types of interactions, you had your first interview in the Expert Witness series with Martin van Wolferstorff, the managing director of Wolferstorff Consulting. And it's an extended interview, so we've got two parts. The first part is obviously coming up today. So what did you manage to ask Martin in part one?
Well, in this episode, we hear from Martin van Wolferstorff on the changing dynamics of the tyre pyrolysis sector. Now that the tyre manufacturers have shown a great deal of interest in the sector, it changes the whole nature of the business. We also hear about the challenge of refining raw recovered carbon black into something marketable, which again has been an ongoing challenge for the industry. And as the market demands more product and greater consistency, this has become more and more important.
Interesting. So that sounds quite to start off. So without any further ado, without any more waiting around, we've got the first part of the interview coming up for you right now.
Martin, you're one of the most experienced consultants in the tyre pyrolysis sector, and you have a wider background in carbon black. Can you tell our viewers and our readers how you see the market for pyrolysis recovered carbon black?
Yes, of course. And one thing has to be said, there's a market before and there's a market after the global corona slowdown. And I think there's a paradigm change going on. And the one paradigm change on the recovered carbon black market is about the growth and the volume, and the second one is about the price. So the volume, what I see now, is really going up and driven by the chemical recycling of the rubber polymer. And I see big chemical companies wanting to integrate in that space. Tyre pyrolysis oil is interesting as a feedstock, a renewable feedstock, low carbon dioxide feedstock for the chemical and polymer industry. However, they need hundreds of thousands of tons of this material. And the typical tyre pyrolysis company does not have sufficient scale for that. So there's growth. But then all of a sudden, they also get the recovered carbon black in tens of thousands of tons, and what to do with it. So that is something going on at the moment. And I see tire companies integrating, I see polymer companies and chemical companies integrating with the tire industry, and that will provide growth. And that is very positive for the recycling industry. The second point is about the price. And the industry, the rubber industry, slowed down a lot, like all the industries in the automotive value chain. And that, of course, had a negative effect on carbon black pricing. And the carbon black pricing now is not very attractive. So the paradigm change for recovered carbon black is that now a second quality recovered carbon black is not sellable anymore. It needs to be a really good recovered carbon black, low volatiles, and very good quality to be able to be sold to the rubber and plastics industry. And such a recovered carbon black doesn't need to be much cheaper than virgin carbon black. It could be around the price of virgin carbon black, could even be more expensive because it's a greener product and it does specific things that normal carbon blacks cannot do. Talking numbers, I think, and I did this assessment last week for a new client in Europe. This is the wider Europe, not EU 28, but including Russia, including Turkey, including Bosnia, and another couple of countries that are not in the EU. I think the market potential for recovered carbon black is about 180,000 tons. This is a big number. What's even more interesting, I think up to 2028, that could be some 330,000 tons, mainly driven by the tire industry seeking volumes. And the tire industry, I made some assumptions for getting to the 300,000 by 2028, but the major driver for the tire industry is not cost reduction. This is very positive, but many of the tire companies have defined percentages of recycled materials they want to include in their tires. For example, Conti wants to go from 3% to 10% by 2025. Michelin, Bridgestone have longer ranging targets. They want to go, I think, 16, 80%, but to 2050 and 2048. However, even a company like Pirelli, who for me a long time were least likely to be interested in recycled materials because they are all about performance, high performance racing tires. Even Pirelli has a target to go to 3% by, I think, 2025. So that is very positive. And now, if I take that on a conservative estimate, and I don't say 3% of the whole tire, but I say 3% just of the carbon black in the tire, and I use that for the projections to 2028. That's a very positive number. So this year, potential could be 180,000 tons. In 2028 could be 330,000 tons. As you know, the supply is nowhere there. The supply is much lower than the demand.
Okay, that's interesting. If the market potential is as high as you believe it to be, can you tell us what do you think is holding the market back?
Yes, I think it is a very complex business, far away from trash to treasure and waste to wealth. There are so many aspects to manage. Technology is only one, and yet because the capex, technology capex, perhaps is the most in the eye of the investors. But there is regulation, there is permits, then finding out about the market. Many investors in tire pyrolysis, at that point when they are interested, they don't even know that tire pyrolysis does not produce carbon black, but it produces recovered carbon black, which is a different product, which can replace carbon black in applications, but it is not carbon black. So it's a long learning process. And I would say the biggest hurdle for these companies is funding, is the money. And I can see successful companies, they're to be found not among the small startups who really have limited budget, but successful companies have already a cash flow engine and they have a tire pyrolysis business unit, a project they want to integrate. However, they have incoming cash flow that allows them to pay for that project all the time. I think that's one of the success factors. And then, of course, every company has their own story. There have been accidents, fires, and many reasons why companies didn't grow as they intended to grow.
Okay. Has a growing interest from the tire companies in pyrolysis become a game changer? We know of supply agreements with Michelin, Continental, Bridgestone, and we can see a lot of activity in China. We've just seen Michelin Ventures invest in Pyrowave dealing with recycling plastics with a view to including the polymers produced in synthetic rubber. What impact is that having on the market?
That is certainly one factor in scaling up. I'm not aware of a Michelin supply agreement. I'm aware of the investment into Scandinavian Enviro, which I take very positive for the scaling up. And even with Michelin, as indicated on the previous question, I think the major growth driver for that is the oil more than the recovered carbon black. But there will be an upside for the recovered carbon black because it will scale alongside the oil. And I also think there's an advantage when you scale up. Probably the quality consistency will increase as well. And that's something that the industry is currently struggling with. The small scale industry is struggling with because everybody's RCB is different. So if you put all them together and compare the quality, they're quite different. However, when you have one large volume out of one production, that is much more consistent quality than several RCBs combined. And that's a really positive driver for the industry. And again, I think it is by ecology, not so much as economy. And I take that very positively.
Okay. Do we have leading pyrolysis processes able to produce RCBs suitable for inclusion in rubber or plastics in a single step? Or do producers still need to refine their char to get a usable end product?
The properties of recovered carbon black are quite different from carbon black. Starting with the composition. Recovered carbon black is a mixture of at least four things. The carbon blacks of the Tyre, which we are recovering. Then there's an inorganic also called ash content, which is a mixture of zinc, sulfur, and all the inorganic content of the Tyre. And then we have two organic contents that are not so good, but depending on the process, we get them. And these are organic volatiles if the pyrolysis has not quite finished to the end. This is the rubber polymer that is sitting in form of kind of oil on top of the recovered carbon black. We can smell it sometimes if there's a lot of volatile contents. And then there's a solid form of fresh carbon, also called char, or in the plastics pyrolysis world, they call it fixed carbon, which is also coming from the rubber polymer, which has been carbonized. And then this doesn't need to be a bad thing. In the rubber world, it is because it inactivates the energy sites on top of the carbon blacks. And this is one of the reasons for less reinforcement, along with the fact that the carbon blacks in the Tyre, that they are not all reinforcing. But if we get that char in plastics, it could be a bonus. We get more carbon material. And in the coloring world, we want high carbon content and low ash content. Ash is a white pigment and carbon is a black pigment. So you could say recovered carbon black is a gray pigment, a dark gray pigment. And the more carbon we get, the better the jetness will be. But answering the question a little bit long-winded, no, there is not a process that can do this in one step, because the raw recovered carbon from the reactor has a particle size distribution that is very wide. That is anything between 1 micron and 1 millimeter. And 1 millimeter is too big a particle to perform well in rubber or plastics. So we need to mill and get the particle size down. That is the least we need to do. But as you know, there's much more we need to do to control the quality, because the feedstock coming in also is very important for the quality coming out. And we need to control the feedstock in a way that the chemical composition of the feedstock into the pyrolysis stays constant all the time. Only then we can get a consistent quality recovered carbon. and oil as well on the output side.
Okay. We've seen presentations from Dr. Chris Norris at Artis, where RCB is placed in a large specification of in a range of specifications rather than as a direct substitute. Is that nebulous nature of RCB specification challenge or an opportunity for the industry?
I think it is a challenge for the buyers. When we put ourselves in the shoes of a buyer that buys carbon black, there is defined categories, ASTM categories of carbon blacks, and you know what you get when you choose ASTM 772. You know exactly what you get and what kind of performance you get in the rubber. The same in the plastics world. They might not use the ASTM nomenclature, but use the old nomenclature like SRF, semi-reinforcing furnace, or for a 300 high abrasion furnace. So they need to know what they buy in order to be able to buy. And that has been a hurdle for the industry. And I hear over and over the question, when will there be quality categories for recovered carbon black? At the moment, there aren't. And for a recent expert report I've wrote, I defined 3 quality categories myself in the absence of quality categories from the ASTM D36 group. And I defined RCB1 as the top quality, the best quality a recovered carbon black can have. Then an intermediate quality RCB2 that might be deficient in 1 or 2 parameters, and RCB3, which is unfinished raw recovered carbon black. And the supply in Europe is about 28 kilotons, which sounds large, but about 15 kilotons of that is the raw version, the uncontrolled feedstock and unmilled raw recovered carbon black. About 10,000 tons, I would say, is high quality, and about the rest, 3,000-4,000 tons, is intermediate quality. And I think the industry could grow much easier by filling certain quality categories so that buyers know what they can buy.
And we're back. Now, Ewan, I thought part 1 was very interesting. Some good things to come out of that. What do you think were the main highlights and takeaways from part 1 of the interview?
We can see for sure that there is a rapidly changing dynamic in the pyrolysis sector. After many years of trials, tire manufacturers are finally getting into RCB use, and the idea of using RCB to replace virgin carbon black. There are, of course, challenges, but along with these challenges come opportunities. The tire pyrolysis sector and the rubber and plastic sectors now need to work in harmony to create better use of recycled materials from the pyrolysis processes.
Okay, interesting, very true. And as always with these types of interviews, it's always good to hear from someone like Martin, considering his knowledge and experience in the area. And I'm sure everyone will be waiting eagerly to see what we've got for part 2. Anyway, thanks for your time today, Ewan, and thank you for interviewing Martin for part 1. And thank you to our listeners and viewers for tuning in. And we'll be returning shortly with another edition of the Tyre Recycling Podcast and part 2 of our expert witness interview with Martin van Wolferstorff. Until next time, stay safe.